You walk into a room and two coworkers who were talking suddenly go quiet. And in half a second, you might have already decided they were talking about me. You didn't hear your name, you didn't catch a single word. Nobody said anything to you at all. But now you feel uncomfortable around both of them. Maybe for the rest of the day, you are a little more distant. Maybe you stop sharing films with them the way you used to. And here's the strange part: nothing was ever actually said to you. You reacted to a conversation you never even heard. This called mind reading is a pattern I see very often in clinical practice and honestly in everyday life too. I'm Dr. Katia Batista, psychiatrist. This is the second video in our series on the little tricks the mind plays on us. And I want to be clear how this one is different from the last one. Catastrophic thinking tries to predict what's going to happen. My reading does something else. It tries to tell you what another person is thinking about you right now. Stay with me because this is one of the hiding forces that can change our relationships from the inside. Let's start with what mind reading actually is, because there is a line here that most of us cross without noticing. Something happens in front of you. That part is real. You see a face, you notice a silence, you watch two people laugh. That's observation, that's information. But then instantly, your mind does something else. It assigns a thought to that behavior. It decides what the person was thinking, feeling, or intending. And that second step, that's where mind reading lives. Watch the jump. You see your supervisor reads your work and say nothing. That's what you observe. She feels incompetent. That's the fault you assign. At a party, two people laugh and glance in your direction. That's what you observe. They were laughing at me. That's the fault you assign. Your partner seems quiet and far away at dinner. Observation. They are bored with me. That's interpretation. Here's the heart of it. We can observe behavior directly. What becomes much less certain is the private meaning we assign to that behavior, because a facial expression is observable. The thought you assign to that face is not. And notice, I am not saying it's wrong to try to understand people. We read each other all day long. We have to. It's part of being human. The distortion doesn't begin when we guess. It begins when we forget we are guessing, when an observation slips into a fact about what someone else is thinking. And there is another important distinction here, because I don't want you to hear this and think the answer is you are always imagining it, sometimes you actually do have a reason to think someone might be upset with you. Maybe you had an argument. Maybe you said something you regret. Maybe you talk about a co-worker behind them. And a few days later, they see all that. In that situation, wondering whether their behavior is connected to what happened is not unreasonable. That's not a distortion. That's paying attention. But watch the line, because even then, the mind does the same thing. There is a difference between saying they may be upset with me and deciding I know exactly what they think of me now, or they hate me, or they will never trust me again. Everyone must know. The first one respects the evidence and stays open. The second one jumps past the evidence into their private mind. Here's the cleanest way I can say it. Having a reason to suspect something is not the same as having access to another person's mind. So, why is that private world so easy to get wrong? Here's the first reason, and it's simple. Most of the time, you don't have access to the whole picture. When you watch someone's behavior, you are missing almost everything that's driving it. You can't see the argument they had this morning, the bad news they got, the headache, the worry they carry that has nothing to do with you. You are reading one a small moment with none of the context, and then filling in the rest yourself. And here's how you fill it in, not randomly, but through the lens you already carry. If you already believe people find you difficult, neutral, behavior can easily look like rejection. If you doubt your own competence, your supervisor's silence can feel like criticism. If you are someone who's sensitive to being left out, two people having a private conversation can suddenly feel like proof you are being excluded. Guilt can become another powerful lens. If you know you did something you regret, you might become unusually alert to every change in that person's behavior, and neutral signals can start to feel connected to what you did. Part of it may be true, part of it may not, but guilt can make everything start to look connected to the thing you are carrying. So here's something worth sitting with. Sometimes we don't actually discover what another person thinks. We recognize our own expectation or our own guilty in their behavior. The other person becomes a kind of mirror, and we read our own worries in their face, and we believe those worries came from them. That's why two people can watch the exact same neutral expression and walk away with completely opposite conclusions. The face didn't change, the lens did. And once we have decided what someone thinks of us, we don't usually keep it to ourselves. We start to act on it, which is where this begins to reshape the relationship itself. This is the part that makes mind reading so different and honestly so important, because it doesn't just stay in your head. It can slowly change the very relationship you are worried about. Let me show you how exactly. You decided she doesn't really like me. You didn't ask, she didn't say it, but now you believe it. So naturally, you become a little more guarded around him, a little cooler. You share less. You keep a small distance to protect yourself. But she may notice that change. She doesn't know what you are thinking either. She may simply notice that you have become more distant or more guarded, and she may begin pulling back too. Do you see what just happened? Your assumption didn't just predict the relationship, it helped shape it. You treated the guess as a fact. You acted on the guess, and your own behavior helped produce the very coldness you thought you were only noticing. This is the heart of it, and is the line I most want you to remember. Sometimes we are not responding to the other person. We are responding to our interpretation of the other person. And eventually, the other person may begin responding to the way we are treating them. That's how an unconfirmed assumption can eventually contribute to a very real change in the relationship. Not because you necessarily read the situation correctly, but because you reacted to it as is you had. So, let me connect this to psychiatry carefully. Mind reading itself is not a psychiatric diagnosis. Most people do this from time to time, but when it becomes frequent and intense, it can play a real role in how people suffer. This kind of interpretation can become particularly important in social anxiety because social situations are full of vague informations, expression, tones, silence. If you repeatedly assign judgment or reaction to vague social cues, those situations can start to feel increasingly threatening, sometimes more threatening than the available evidence supports. It can also overlap with that we call interpersonal sensitivity, a heightened tendency to perceive criticism, disapproval, or rejection in others. And it can become part of the repetitive thinking we see in anxiety and in depression, where someone replays interactions again and again, searching each one for signs that they are disliked. Now I want to be clear with you as a doctor. I always repeat that in my videos. This one habit is not the cause of any of these conditions on its own. This condition usually developed through multiple interacting factors: temperament, personal history, life experiences, trauma, biology, and the current circumstances. But this way of thinking can contribute really to the stress and help maintain certain symptoms. And that part we can learn to work on. So here's how we work with it. And it comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. But this time, instead of just separating facts from a story, we are going to slow down the exact moment where an observation becomes someone else's fault. First, what did I actually observe? Not she was annoyed with me. That's already an interpretation, just the observable fact. She replied more briefly than usual. Strip it back to what a camera could have recorded. Second, what thought or intention did I assign to that person? This is where you catch the mind reading in the act. She thinks I'm not good at job. Notice that you added that it wasn't in the room, just was in your head. Third, what evidence could I actually need before I could reasonably know that's true? This one is powerful because usually the honest answer is much more information than I currently have. More context, clear behavior, or direct communication. And here's a companion question that makes this even sharper. Is there any real context that makes my interpretation more or less plausible? Did something actually happen between us? Or am I building this out of nothing? That's not about distrusting your intuition. It's about calibrating it against evidence. And then the question that holds it all: can I sit with not knowing without turning my assumption into their fault? Can I let it stay a maybe? And when the relationship genuinely matters, there is one more option, and it's not endless reassuring seeking. Is real communication. Communication is the key to get actual information instead of inventing it. A simple calm, hey, you seemed a bit quiet earlier. Is everything okay? Sometimes one honest question can clarify a story you might otherwise have carried for days or weeks. And there is one more thing I have to say because it's the honest one. Sometimes the most useful next step is not to keep analyzing what the other person may be thinking. If you already know you did something that may have hurt them, the more important work may be to take responsibility, communicate, and repair what actually happened. My reading can become a way to stay stuck, guessing, when what the situation really needs is for you to go and make it right. Because you don't discover what someone thinks by staring harder at their face. You find out by staying humble about what you can't see, and when it matters, by communicating directly. So let's go back to those two co-workers, the ones who went quiet when you walk in. Here's what actually happened. They stopped talking when you walk in. That's it. That's the whole fact. They were talking about me was not what you handed them. Maybe they were, maybe, but maybe they were not. Maybe it had nothing to do with you at all. But until you have enough information, those are two completely different things. What happened and what you decided it meant. The goal is not to convince yourself everyone likes you or that nothing is ever wrong. Sometimes something is wrong and you will deal with it when you actually know. The goal is to stop handing other people thoughts they may have never had and then reacting to them as if they were real. So, next time you feel that certainty rising, then instant, I know what they think of me. Try leaving one small door open. Maybe, but I don't actually know yet. I'm Dr. Katia Batista. If your mind does this too, you are not alone. Tell me in the comments what's the situation where you must catch yourself sure you know what someone is thinking. A silence, a look, a group you were not included in. Please subscribe and like it for more video like this. Take care of yourselves and try not to believe everything you think about what others think. See you in the next one. Thank you.